Oh, my lovely green tea. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Facebook. Greetings, everybody. June Allen here, your racial sobriety mentor. Hello, Silent Echoes Therapy. Thanks for joining. June Allen here, your racial sobriety mentor from juneallen.net, and I teach black women how to heal from the impact of racism with sacred self-love and racial sobriety. So what's racial sobriety? Racial sobriety is your ability to understand the impact of racism and do the internal work so that you can stand in the power of who you are, stand in the greatness of who you are as a black woman. So racial sobriety came about, just to give you a little bit of background for those of you that don't know who I am. Thank you for all the emojis, Silent Echoes Therapy. It's really lovely. Just type your name. I don't want to call you Silent Echoes Therapy. Just type your name so that I've got a bit of a better idea of who you are. Just jot your name down in the comments. So those of you that don't know my work, so the whole idea of racial sobriety actually came about because I've been in recovery since 2009. I went into recovery initially because off the back of a really just painful relationship. And I had loads of codependent issues. I had loads of childhood wounds that I hadn't been healed. And I just wanted to know what was going on in terms of my relationships, why they were so painful. Why was it that I found it so difficult to love myself? Why is it that I carried so much shame? And I went through the recovery process. I went through the 12-step process in recovery, and it was an amazing experience. But after maybe about 2 or 3 years, I realized that there was no cultural context. And so then began my obsession with trying to discover, trying to explore, trying to understand, what impact racism had on me personally. What impact did it have on my family? What impact did it have on my ancestors? Is there a link between my ancestors in Jamaica that were, part of a slave experience in the Caribbean for so long, and them not going to having any therapy or anything? Hi Dee, thanks for joining. Okay, that's good. So now I know I know it's Dee. I'll use your name. I just became obsessed with trying to find out what was the link. None of our ancestors went to therapy when they left the slave plantation. So what happened to all that trauma? How has that been translated into who I am today? How has that been translated into my DNA? Is there stuff going on with me that I don't know about but unconsciously is still being transferred into generationally? All of these things are stuff that came up for me. And so I just started exploring a lot more. I started reading a lot more books. I started, I've been in therapy for years as well. Absolutely love going to therapy. And I just came up with this notion of racial sobriety, because the whole idea of racial sobriety makes sense when we talk about racism being like an addiction to power. That's how it started. I started understanding that, actually racism is kind of, it's an addiction, just like anything else. Addiction is something where you just can't stop doing it. And the whole idea around addiction and racism, it just made so much sense. And so that when I put the link between racism being an addiction to power and us as black people being co-addicts or codependent as a result of living under the system of racism, we also I know that a lot of my journey and a lot of my pain and stuff is as a result of unhealed pain, as a result of living under the system of racism, be it intergenerationally or current or whatever. That had an impact on my ability to show up as a human being, as a black woman, in my power. So I just started talking about it and writing about it, and the last 2 or 3 years I've been sharing a lot more about it and stuff like that. So it's just been really, really good. So somebody's put, gutted, I've got a client now. I feel as though you're speaking to me. It's an area I'm also very intrigued and passionate about. You can watch the replay. But the stuff I'm going to be talking about is, obviously the topic today is about 20 ways to experience more love. But I'm also going to be talking specifically, because it's inspired by my Living in Love program, where all of these things are going to be talked about in a lot more detail. So you can watch the replay, Dee. And if you've got any questions or anything, you can send me a direct message or email me info@yardofgreatness.com. Okay, so that's a little bit about me, my background in addiction. Sorry if I rabbited on a bit. So I've just got 3 requests on this live stream. The first one is, if you know anybody that is interested in this topic, that has been single for a long time, loveless, or maybe they're in a relationship but they still feel disconnected, or maybe you've got children or whatever and you feel like you can't connect to them, and whatever it is, you've got something that's not right around the whole idea around love or whatever, share it with them, tag them, let them know that there is hope and that there is things that can be done to actually help you to experience a lot more love. So that's the first one. Share it with your friends if you know anyone that's interested in this topic. The second thing is, if you've got any questions about anything that I've shared, you can drop them in the comments below. I also understand that this is a public platform, so if you don't want to drop your comments below, you can either send me a private message or you can email me at info@yardofgreatness.com. And the last thing I have to say is that the stuff that I share on these broadcasts is for information purposes only. I am a student psychotherapist, but I've not qualified yet. So this is not a substitute for therapy. So you need to see a licensed mental health professional if you've got any deeper issues that need to be looked at. So let's get into the topic. So the content tea today is all about experiencing more love. Now, this is inspired by my new Living in Love program, which actually it's actually live at the moment. The doors are open for it, but the first session doesn't actually happen until the first session happens next Wednesday the 11th. So the new program is actually a kind of follow-on from the sister circle that I did that just finished in at the beginning of November. So we did this book last time, Sisters of the Ann Bell Hooks, and it was really good. We took a chapter every month and we dug into it, explored it. I created journal prompts. It was really good, and we did that. It was in person. We did it in London. So, but as a result of that, I realised that there was clearly a need for it, and I kept getting loads of people that kept asking me about, I don't live in London, can I get, I want to come, but I don't live in the UK, and all the rest of it. I kept getting all these messages from people saying that they want to be involved, but obviously they don't live locally, so they can't come to it in person. So I basically, also people wanted more accountability, because the other thing that I did was only once a month, and so people were saying to me also that they wanted an opportunity to do it more regularly. Once a month was not enough. They needed more accountability and stuff like that, and wanted more connection. So I've taken a lot of the feedback and stuff that people have said, and I've actually created this program, which is now being moved online. It's being moved online, so I'm really, really excited about that. So wherever you are around the globe, you will have the opportunity to join the new program. So the ladies in the previous circle also suggested that they wanted another Bell Hooks book, which is this one. Okay, so it's all about this. This book is called All About Love by Bell Hooks. Now, it's not, even though we're using the book as a topic of conversation, it's not like a standard book club. It's way bigger than a book club, okay? Because you really do get the opportunity we only do one chapter a month, okay? One chapter a month. And what I tend to do is I literally take the chapter and I basically pull out all of the delicious topics from that one thing, and I do live streams, I do master classes. This is what's going to happen in the Living in Love program. I do master classes, and you'll have 2 live sessions per month where you can where we basically discuss the chapter, and we talk about issues that have come up, and then obviously depending on if there's any topics that come up that I think that need to be explored a bit more, than I normally do a master class or stuff like that afterwards, as part of the package as well. So if you're interested in anything that I'm saying and you would like to sign up for the Living in Love program, you can click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So what I'm going to be talking about with you today is not only 20 ways that you can experience more love, but how you can manifest and nurture more love in your life by joining the program. And I'm going to show you all of the benefits, all of the things that are going to help you, and the way that me and the team are going to support you at the Art of Greatness to be able to experience more love in your life. And one of the things that Bell Hooks does talk a lot about in her books, which is so painful, is, you know, the lovelessness of black women. And for those of you that don't know who Bell Hooks is, she's an American writer, cultural critique. She talks a lot about sexism, feminism. You know, she talks about white supremacy. She talks about, the intersectionality between all of those things and how they kind of impact each other. So those sort of topics of conversation come up quite a lot around the black woman and lovelessness, and, you know, the way that we deprive ourselves of love and how difficult it is for us as black women to admit, you know, to be really honest with ourselves about the pain of that lovelessness, that loneliness that we feel, that void that we feel around not feeling worthy of love, not being able to experience love in a way that really meets our needs. So this is really why, this is one of the reasons why the ladies in the previous program wanted me to address this, to use this book, but also because they know that I will totally break down the chapter for them. We don't just read. It's not like an ordinary book club where you go and read the book, read the chapter, and then you go home. No, it's not like that. There's so many different things, and I'm going to go through all of the ways that we would, you know, I can support you in all of that in the group. So let's get going. Okay, so the first category is the practical things. Okay, so the first thing, way to kind of manifest more love, and especially when you've had if you were raised in a home that was difficult, if you had a childhood that included, you know, like severe separation, or if there was abuse, or, you know, if there was a lot of internalized racism or whatever in your family, you know, you need tools. Okay, you need solution focused tools that are going to help you to understand what's going on for you. It could be talking, it could be meditation. There were so many different things. And as part of the check-ins, that, you know, there is a list of 12 tools that you can use. And I've actually got more than that actually, but you keep it to 12 for the actual check-in sessions. But there is more that I will be giving to the group. And this is to ensure that we don't get stuck in victimhood. Now, quite often we can get stuck in the self-pity and the victimhood because we feel powerless. We feel powerless, and because it's a natural human need to love and be loved. When we don't get that, you know, it can be difficult for us to admit those things. It can be difficult for us to admit those things, and then we can become victims of our own pain. We can get stuck in our own pain because we don't know how to make it better. We don't understand our own pain around love, and so we don't know how to make it better. And this is one of the things that I've always encouraged in the programs that I've had, because the women have the opportunity to speak honestly. You know, I've created boundaries and stuff in the spaces that I use to empower women, because they also need to have the freedom and the safety in order to be able to share things. And some of the women have shared things that are really delicate, and they've been quite intimate and very painful, some of it. But the relief that they get around doing that has been really powerful for the other ladies in the group as well. It's encouraged them to be more vulnerable about what's going on for them, and also, you know, that sense of relief has been really powerful for them. So having solution focused tools, actually practical things that you can do around love, is really important. And that is something that, you know, that is part of the actual program. It's not just about that's the first one. So the second thing is about, you know, there's no kind of motivational fluff. You know, I see a lot of stuff going around where people can say the right things and it feels good at that particular time, but there's no real practical tools. That's like I'm saying, it's a part of number one. It has to be solution focused, and there has to be tools. There has to be practical things that need to be done in order to be able to to make the transformation happen. It's not just about words. It's not just about reading. Okay, it's not just about reading things that feel good. It's about actually having tools where you can actually say, I'm going to do this because it means that I'm going to experience more love if I do this thing. That's the difference. You've got to have tools, and you need compassionate accountability, which is why I've increased the amount of time that we spend together in terms of the sister circles. You know, the women wanted more time. They wanted more time, they wanted more structured spaces to be able to share how they're feeling, to be able to understand their feelings, and to be able to, to be able to show up for themselves and have other women show up for them. You know, that's really, really important, really, really important. So number 2, compassionate accountability in a safe space is absolutely crucial in order to experience more love, so that you can unpick the things that you think are creating a situation that's making love difficult, and for you to be able to step forward and step into the place of compassion and to be able to receive more love. So number 3, which is kind of a bit similar with the accountability, is having the solution focused tools, is having rituals, having love rituals that are going to help you. It becomes like a daily thing. A lot of times, we tend to do things around love or do things around feeling better about ourselves when we're at crisis point. We only want to make change when we're feeling in a lot of pain. And that doesn't always work. You've got to, if you want to experience more love, you have to show up at the vibration of love, which means that there has to be daily love rituals. There has to be rituals of love that happen on a daily basis. There are things that I do every day that generate, that bring me up, bring my vibration up to the level of love. One of the things that I do on a daily basis is to journal, not just to write randomly, but I do like a feelings check-in with myself. I have like a feelings chart, so that I can really check in and get clear on how I'm feeling on that in any particular moment. And then I write about what's going on. I also write out my goals, and there are things that I do on a daily basis which actually are going to bring me up vibrationally to that level of love, which means I'm going to attract more love into my life because I'm already bringing myself up to that level. It's about taking responsibility and standing in your own power around how you receive love, as opposed to sitting back passively and waiting for love to kind of knock on the door and say, "Hi, are you in? Can you let me in?" Love is not going to knock on your door and let you in. Love is not going to knock on your door and say, "I'm here." We have to put ourselves at the vibrational level to be able to receive love. And that's what we're going to be doing in the December sessions. Actually, we're going to be talking about how to define love, and we're also going to be talking about love rituals, because at the end of the day, if you want to receive more love, and when I talk about love as well, I'm talking about all different types of love. I'm not just talking about romantic love. A lot of times we can get stuck in the whole thing around romantic love, which is part of it, which is a lot of us want that. We obviously want the intimacy, we want all of that stuff. But there are so many different types of love. It can be love around culture, it can be love around friendship, it can be love around purpose, it can be love for the earth, love around beauty and art, and there are so many different ways. And I think when we give ourselves permission to connect to love on all these different levels and vibrations, it's going to enrich our lives so much more, rather than focusing on just one. And actually, when you focus on the other ones as well, you're going to have all the other ones as well that you want, because your vibration is very different. Your vibration is very, very different. So, doing the love rituals, the daily love rituals that are going to bring you up vibrationally, is really going to help you to manifest a lot more love in your life by doing that. And this is something, again, that we're going to be doing in the December version of the program, so that I can help you set up your rituals, your daily rituals, to actually be manifesting more love. And actually, we focus on the daily rituals in terms of love for self. It's not about externalizing it. The daily rituals that we do are about love for self, because when we love ourselves a lot more, then we attract the energy of love from others. That's how it works. Okay, so that's number 3, simple love rituals. Number 4, so we're getting now into the emotional and the cultural part of it. So we have to understand, in order to manifest more love, we have to understand the impact of internalized racism on our ability to love and be loved. Okay, and it clicks into what I was saying at the top of the broadcast when I was talking about the whole thing around, understanding that, my parents came from Jamaica, and Jamaica, there was a lot of slavery and whatever there. It was a slave farm for a long time. It was a slave farm. And, not just what happened to our ancestors, but as that trauma has been transmitted down the generations, number one, how has that impacted my ability to love and be loved unconsciously? And with all the stuff that's happened in my own personal life, the stuff that happened in my family of origin as a child, did I feel loved as a child? Were my parents able to give me love? Because of their own internalized racism or their own stuff that's been passed down through them. It's about having those conversations, those cultural conversations about how the impact of racism has impacted our ability to love. Even in the current climate today, you know, how do you think about love as a black person? Do you think that love is just for white people? You might not think it consciously. And I know this is a conversation that I've had with myself on many occasions. You know, unconsciously, you think that, you may think that love is just for white people. And if you think about the portrayal of black love on TV, you know, a lot of times it's negative. You know, this is one of the reasons why I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm very selective about what I watch on the internet or on Netflix or whatever, because a lot of times the stereotypes, especially on British TV, the stereotypes around love and stuff like that, especially when we're talking about black love, it's negative. It's negative. And, you know, so as a result of that, what are you and I consciously ingesting? What are we telling ourselves? What is that narrative? How is that narrative being transformed in our mind and impacting how we show up in our relationships? Does it kind of reinforce the stereotype in my head about what I think about black men? Is it reinforcing stereotypes about how I think about myself as a black woman, and that black love is not possible, black people can't have relationships, all this kind of stuff? It's so important to understand that, because when you understand that, it's so much easier to unpick what belongs to you and what might belong to other people, or what might belong to white supremacy. What is that white supremacist conversation that's going on in your head around relationships? You can unpick that. And this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people value the work that I do, because there's always, I always put a cultural context on it. You know, I don't just want to talk about relationships or love in the context of, in a general manner. As black people, I don't feel like I'm serving my community appropriately if I'm not having conversations from a cultural context, from the context of how is racism impacting that behaviour or that part of you. Because at the end of the day, we live under the system of racism still. And I don't understand how you can really have conversations about well-being and wellness and all the rest of it if you're not talking about the racial part of it. You have to talk about the other part of it as well, because at the end of the day, that's our reality. And I'm not saying that to kind of to play the victim or to blame white people. It's none of that. It's about, my thing is all about what have we internalized and how can we unpick that to make sure that your thinking and your values and the way that you show up in relationships is who you are and not what you've internalized from white supremacy. Do you understand the difference? It's about giving you the opportunity to empower yourself. The empowerment is how you understand how racism has impacted you as a person, and then unpicking that. Understanding the behaviours, understanding the thinking, understanding not just in yourself but in other people. So understanding the impact of racism, the impact of internalized racism on how you love and how your ability to love and be loved is such a crucial part of this program. Because if you don't understand that bit, then this program is not for you, basically, because that bit has to be talked about. Okay, so that's number 4, understanding the impact of internalized racism. Number 5 is exploring your unconscious patterns of love avoidance. Now, this one was such a huge one for me, because that's my pattern. And this is because I went to a couple of weeks ago. I went to a really powerful conference about attachment. Okay, and what was great about it was right up my street. It was all about attachment from a cultural perspective. I don't know if I've still got the book here. I don't know what I've done with it. I think I put it away somewhere. Anyway, if I find the book, I'll have to put it in the comments or whatever. But I went to this amazing conference, and it was all about. Oh no, here it is. Oh. The lady's called Elaine Arnold, okay, and the book is called Working with Families of African and Caribbean Origin, Understanding the Issues Around Immigration and Attachment. Fantastic, absolutely amazing conference. And this woman talked about the whole idea of attachment and how, you know, it's difficult for the difficulties that a lot of black people have experienced as a result of, you know, a lot of people were left in the Caribbean when they were little, and when they kind of met up with their parents years later, the relationships were just, you know, quite chaotic and stuff like that. There was a lot of resentment, anger. It's traumatizing. you know. So that in of itself, when those early attachments are not secure, then attaching to other people in relationship, actually, so piece of the puzzle, you wanted the name of the book, you want me to read it again? Which one? The attachment one, this one, or the red one? I'll read both of them just in case. The name of the book, the attachment book, is called Working with Families of African and Caribbean Origin, Understanding Issues Around Immigration and Attachment, and it's by Elaine Arnold. If you Google Elaine Arnold, you'll get a website and whatnot, and it will give you more, you know, it will show you where the book is and everything. Okay, great. So that's that one. So yeah, so if that issue of attachment as a child has been disrupted, okay, it's going to be very, very difficult for the child to have adult relationships, because that core attachment, that primary attachment, never happens. So attachment as an adult can feel quite scary, because the abandonment pain is so intense. The abandonment pain is so intense, and this is my story. Even though my mum was, you know, I didn't get left in the Caribbean or anything. My parents were here, but my parents were more emotionally absent. Okay, my parents were emotionally absent, which meant that I didn't connect. I didn't bond to my parents because they were emotionally absent. And also, there's that thing in, you know, with children getting hit by their parents and all the rest of it. So all of that kind of stuff also disconnected, you know, made the attachment very more difficult. So, you know, my journey of healing was about learning, not only understanding my attachment issues, but also learning how to reattach to people, and actually realizing that I can be a lot more discerning about who I attach to as a parent. So I had to do a lot of inner child work. And just really understanding the whole thing around, you know, understanding what's going on for me physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, you know, when I'm in relationship with people, so that I understand, you know, that there's quite a lot of times, as you know, that person I have to basically do a lot of my own personal work in order to deal with the attachment stuff. So it's about exploring an important way to have more love. To nurture more love is to be clear about your patterns of love avoidance. How do you deny love? What experiences have you had growing up as a child with your parents or with caregivers that were not loving? You know, that's going to really impact your ability to attach and to love other people as a grown-up. And you can't manifest more love in an authentic way, without actually doing that internal work. And you know, in order to manifest more love in your life as an adult, you have to first do the self-love stuff. The self-love stuff is important, because then again, vibrationally, you're going to attract more of the other love that you want, but you have to do it internally first. Otherwise, you know, you'll attract people into your life that want to love you, but it's not, you won't let yourself be loved, because that core wound around attachment is still a source of pain. It's still a wound that's not been healed. So therefore, you're not going to allow yourself to be loved. But, you know, this is something that we're going to be exploring a lot more in the program, so that you can, again, prepare yourself and understand the wound, so that you can allow yourself to begin to do that healing work, so that you can attract more love into your life. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6 is getting clear around your needs. Now, this is a massive one, because so many of us don't know what our needs are. And living under the system of racism means that a lot of it, that's how we've been set up. A lot of us, the system of racism sets black women up to not have any needs. We're supposed to be the strong black woman. We're supposed to be the mule of the world. We're supposed to do, you know, we're supposed to caretake everybody. White people, you know, white women, they want us to be their mammies or whatever. You know, but we too much, so much so that we're lost in our own kind of sense of wanting to belong, wanting to be accepted. We abandon our own needs for other people, and it has to stop. It has to stop. But in order for you to understand what your needs are, you first have to be willing to admit that you don't know what they are. This is something that came up that was quite powerful, actually. When I did we did the retreat to Ghana. I mean, my business partner did a retreat in Ghana, for those of you that don't know, at the beginning of November, and it was really powerful. And it was interesting because, you know, the ladies had an opportunity to check in, do a feelings check-in. And there were a few occasions I noticed where, you know, on one side there was a list of feelings, on the other side there was a list of needs. And some of the ladies just found it so difficult to articulate what their needs were. And that is so typical of us. And, you know, I put my hand up in that. Before I started doing this work, I did exactly the same thing. I found it really difficult and actually quite painful at times to actually say, I need this. I need this. We're so deprived and starved of emotional nourishment. And again, I think this goes back to childhood. You know, a lot of times, and I'm not disrespecting parents, because I know a lot of our parents, they're victims of their own poverty and whatever, and they just didn't have the tools. That's not me making excuses, but, you know, that is a bigger part of the conversation. But a lot of our parents will say, well, you know, what do you mean I didn't love you? Well, you got shoes on your foot, you know, you got food in your belly or whatever. So they're talking about the practical things. But at an emotional level, a lot of us didn't get our needs met. And that's real talk. A lot of us didn't get our needs met. And a lot of times, you know, a lot of us can feel guilty about thinking that, you know, that we didn't get our own emotional needs met, because they did provide for us practically. But as human beings, we need emotional nourishment as well as the practical stuff. We need emotional nourishment as well as the practical stuff. And this is the reason why, you know, the stuff that I'm doing in this program is so important, because you need to give yourself permission, and you need a group, you need a tribe of women to be able to give you permission to say, you have the right to say, I need this. You know, you have the right to say to yourself, I need this. I need this and I want this. Not because you're being selfish, but because as a human being, you deserve the right to be nourished emotionally, spiritually, physically. You deserve the right to be nourished from a place of love, not from a place of deprivation. And a lot of us are so used to deprivation that we don't even know we need it. It's only when we really start to do the work or start having conversations about it that it's, you know, that sense of sadness and that grief will start to come up, because we realise that actually, oh my God, I didn't get that when I was a child, or I didn't get that as an adult, or I've denied myself of that in relationships because I didn't know how to ask for it, or I didn't know I needed it. We're so used to taking the scraps and the crumbs from other people and allowing ourselves just to take the crumbs that we don't know what real needs feel like. We don't know what real needs feel like. So it is so important to be able to clarify what your needs are, because once you understand what your needs are, you can manifest more love. You can't manifest love if you don't know what your needs are, because love requires you to be honest about what you need. And if you can't say what your needs are, then you can't manifest love. So you need to be able to be clear about what your needs are. Okay, so that's number 6. Number 7 is an increased knowledge of self. Now, I love this one because this is one of the things that absolutely blew me away about the recovery process, about therapy. There is just nothing more powerful than understanding your own bullshit. Number 1, understanding your own bullshit, and then understanding your behaviors, understanding your thinking, understanding how you respond to others and why you behave a certain way. This is what is so powerful about unpicking a lot of this stuff. And this is what doing the inner work means. It means giving yourself permission and being willing to go, do you know what? I know that there's stuff going on with me, and I know it's probably it might hurt, and I know I might feel a little bit, you know, I might feel a certain way about saying certain things, but I'm going to say these things anyway. I'm going to allow myself to be vulnerable. Love requires you to be vulnerable. Love and vulnerability go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So if you're not willing to get vulnerable, then the Living in Love program is not for you. The Living in Love program that I've just launched is not for you, because you have to be willing to get vulnerable if you want to experience more love. For those of you that have just joined, my name is June Allen from juneallen.net, and I teach black women how to heal from the impact of racism with sacred self-love and personal empowerment and racial sobriety. So today's topic is all about 20 ways to manifest more love, and it's inspired by my new Living in Love program that is now, the doors are now open, and the first session actually is going to be happening next Wednesday, the 11th. And if you want more details about it, you can go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So yeah, increased knowledge of self. So I absolutely love that part of the healing process. Just understanding the behaviors, understanding why I do certain things or why I don't do certain things, because that's where the empowerment is. And it actually, when it comes out of the unconscious into the conscious, that's when you can start to take action on it. That's when you can start to do the things that you really want. That's when you can really start to manifest these things in your life, because you're understanding of your behavior and who you are as a human being, as a black woman. That's when you can really start to make changes. You can't make changes if you don't know what's going on. You have to be clear about it. So that increased knowledge of self is really powerful, and that's from an emotional, I'm talking about that from an emotional perspective. I'm coming on to identities as another thing later on. So that's number 7. Number 8 is understanding and processing your emotion. Now, this is a huge one for us as black people, because so many times I hear black people saying, don't be so emotional, why are you so emotional? And it's used as a way to shame each other into closing down our emotions. The reason why black people are so emotional is because we're having to hold a lot of everyone else's crap. The reason why so many black people are so emotional or find it difficult to control their emotions is they're not being heard. They ain't got safe spaces to express how they feel. They're internalizing crap from living under the system of racism all day, every day. That they're under pressure to earn money and feed our families. This is something that we have to stop, family. We have to stop shaming other people for having emotions. Yes, there will be times when people react, and they might overreact in your terms. But sometimes people, because if you don't have a regular outlet to be able to understand and process your feelings, that's how people are going to behave. So when I see that stuff now, I'm compassionate. I can be compassionate to it because I understand it. I understand that that person is behaving that way because they've probably got a lot of stuff going on underneath the surface. And 9 times out of 10, if somebody's really overreacting and being over emotional, it's probably not the thing that you think they're being emotional about. In that moment, that's really underneath the emotion. Normally there's a backlog of stuff. There's a backlog of stuff that they haven't dealt with. And it's like a pressure cooker. So one little thing is going to make them kick off. Okay? That is why the accountability space and having this program is so important, because number one, I want people to understand what they're going through. And this program is not, the program is called Living in Love, but it's not going to be all fluffy and flowers and all the rest of it all the time. It's for women, it's for black women that really want to do the internal work. And sometimes that internal work means having conversations and doing things that are going to feel uncomfortable, that will feel unpleasant, that might hurt, that might make you cry sometimes. But the ultimate goal of this is to manifest more love. And sometimes love means saying and doing things that you don't like. We have to come out of that fantasy of thinking that love is just about either being perfect all the time or, not being human. Love is about accepting your humanity. It's about having compassion for your humanity as a black person, understanding that there are systems of oppression in place that are going to have an impact on how we love ourselves and how we love each other. So the Living in Love program is there to help you to unpick and understand your emotion. To understand your emotion and more importantly, to process the emotion. To say, I feel angry today. I feel angry because somebody I loved did this to me. I feel ashamed today because I don't have a lot of self-love for myself today. And what will we do? In the program, you will get a list of tools to be able to deal with those feelings. You will have tools to process the anger. You will have tools to deal with the shame. You'll have cultural meditations, cultural affirmations. A space to be able to sit and listen to other people that are going through the same thing as you, so you're not going to be alone. That stuff is really, really, really important about understanding and processing your emotions. A lot of time we suppress our emotions because we're scared that other people are going to say something about us. But if you're in a safe space, and this is something that came up quite a lot when I was doing the other program with the ladies, is that one person would start saying one thing, start a topic of conversation about one thing, and then the other ladies will say, oh, I thought I was the only person that felt like that. No, you're not the only person. You might feel alone because you haven't yet found a safe space to be able to process those feelings or to understand those feelings. I'm here to let you know that there are safe spaces out there, and the Living in Love program is one of those spaces for black women to be able to explore their racial wellness. Okay? To understand your emotion, to honour your emotion and not deny it, to explore it so that you can have more, you can manage them better. And that then you don't get to a place of crisis where you're so wound up and angry and in so much rage because you haven't had a consistent place to be able to process how you're feeling. If you ain't got a safe, consistent space to process how you're feeling, you're going to be like a pressure cooker. And that's when you lash out in your relationships. That's when you lash out on your kids. When you lash out on yourself. Or deny yourself because you're angry with yourself. It doesn't have to be that way. You can choose to do something else, but you have to be willing to do the internal work. You have to be willing to do the internal work. So that's number 8, understanding and processing emotion. Number 9 is increased mindfulness. Like I was saying before, when you have a safe space to be able to process your emotion and to be able to understand your feelings and stuff like that, it's going to make you more mindful. You're going to really understand a lot more about who you are, why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And you'll be able to observe your behaviour a lot more as opposed to reacting to it. There's a difference between observing your behaviour and reacting to it. When you're more mindful of what's going on, you can you can observe the anger and go, oh, okay, I'm feeling a bit angry today. Okay, what tool do I need? Why am I angry? And am I angry about something that's happened in this moment, or am I angry about something that happened last week that I haven't really talked about? And then what you can do with that anger is you can process it in a way that feels appropriate, depending on where you are, who you're with. Are you on your own? What energy, how much energy have you got? All of these things are really, really important. And that's what mindfulness is. It's just being aware, being self-aware. It's not denying your emotion. It's not denying who you are as a human being, as a black woman. It's giving you permission to honour who you are, but also giving you a sense of empowerment because you're accepting your humanity, number 1. And number 2, you can do something about it. You'll be able to do something about it because you've got tools. Okay, so that's number 9, mindfulness. Number 10 is having more love is about reducing the isolation and reducing the stigma. Okay, and this is kind of like in alignment with what I was saying at the beginning around, black women feeling like we have to, be the strong woman, and that, we're not allowed to have feelings or needs or anything like that. There's almost like a stigma for us as black women. We're not allowed to have feelings. We're not allowed to have needs. We're not allowed to show up and be vulnerable because we're scared about what other people are going to say. We're scared about what your partner's going to say. We're scared about how our children are going to react. I used to find it really difficult to be vulnerable around my daughter, but now if I wouldn't need to cry, I'll let her see me cry. Because she needs to understand that I'm a human being. I'm not just her mum, but I'm a human being, and things impact me as well in that way. I'm a human being, and when I show her that I'm a human being and I'm imperfect and I've got my own stuff going on, it also gives her permission to be herself and to be vulnerable and whatever with me. I've got to model that for her. I can't carry this Wonder Woman syndrome. This a lot of times is put onto us, and then think about how she's going to behave, because I'm modelling that for her. Ashley saying they can relate to this shame around having knees. Yeah, it's so painful. This thing around having knees, it is so painful. It's so painful having this whole thing around shame. And I was talking about shame is one of the core blocks actually for denying love. I should do a whole series on shame actually, because shame is a topic when we talk about racism and internalized racism and blackness. Shame is one of the core things that actually stops us being loved. It stops us being abundant. It stops us on so many levels, but not a lot of us are having that conversation. And I think it's time for a conversation around shame and love and how we show up and stuff like that. So I am going to be talking about that. I'll probably do that as the masterclass, actually, in the December masterclass, because it's such an insidious disease. It's such an insidious disease that a lot of us don't really understand. And so it kind of, and it's a silent thing that kind of goes on in the background, and it can drive your behavior. It can drive addictive behavior. It drives rage. It drives isolation. Shame is such a painful thing, and internalized racism feeds that shame. It feeds that shame. So if you're carrying a lot of shame, or if you internalized a lot of shame, or if you had experiences growing up or whatever where you were in a family that was very shaming, it's going to be difficult for you to receive. It's going to be difficult for you to give love, and it's going to be difficult for you to receive love, because at your core, there's a feeling of unworthiness. There's a feeling that that you don't deserve, and you do deserve it. But you have to be really clear with yourself and understanding shame, understanding how shame isolates us and creates a stigma around us asking for help. So that's number 10. The program is going to give you the opportunity to have conversations, honest conversations about the loneliness that we feel. And that's, like I was saying at the beginning, Bell Hooks talks a lot in her work about the isolation with black women, and how a lot of us, we hide behind this strong black woman conversation. I don't need no man. I don't need no, but it's BS. It's BS. I don't need this, and I can do it all by myself. No, you can't. No, you can't do it all by yourself. You need a tribe. You need a support system. And it's important that you're willing to be vulnerable in order to do the work. If you want more love in your life, you have to be willing to do the work. And that is as simple as that. So that's number 10, okay, reducing the isolation and stigma. Number 11 is increased self-confidence in relationships. Now, this is the powerful thing about doing the internal work. As you do more work on yourself, as you release and let go of all of the crap, and you're processing all of the stuff that's happened, because you feel more connected to yourself, warts and all, you're standing in the truth because you're being vulnerable, and you're speaking your truth about who you are as a person. You are going to feel more confident because you're more self-accepting. You are going to feel more confident in relationships. And when you start doing things like being a lot clearer about your needs and what you understand about who you are and all of this kind of stuff, you'll feel more confident to be able to set boundaries. And that's what number 12 is. You're going to feel much more stronger person. I couldn't set boundaries in the beginning when I first started doing this work because I didn't have any self-esteem. And I was like, oh no, if I set a boundary, that person won't like me, or that person's going to be angry, or they're going to think that I'm a really bad person because I set back, all of those conversations kept going around in my head, and it actually stopped me setting boundaries or asking for my needs to get met, because that's childhood stuff. That's childhood stuff. That's not feeling like I belong. That's not feeling worthy. That's not feeling loved. So I kind of carried on that pattern for myself. Because that's what I learned. And this is what's empowering about doing the internal work, because you can understand what you've internalized and taken on, the patterns of behavior that you're continuing to live out, that I continue to live out in my adult life, that I'd experienced in childhood, and I just couldn't let those things go. Because a lot of time we do that stuff unconsciously. A lot of time we do this stuff unconsciously because we're not conscious of it. We don't understand. When you start to have conversations about it, or there's been those, sometimes it's not even about having a conversation about it. Sometimes just hearing somebody else talk about it, or other people talking about it in a safe space in a group, that's when you really start to go, oh my God, that's me. And I heard that as well in the previous group that I've done. I hear that a lot from the women that I work with. They think it's just them. They think it's just them by themselves, and it ain't. And this is all part of the system of white supremacy to keep us isolated so that we don't talk to each other. So there is no unity, there is no sisterhood, there can be no relationship, because we all think that we're going through this stuff by ourselves, and we're not. You're not going through this stuff by yourself, and you don't have to do it by yourself either. When you start to feel a lot better in yourself and you've built your own personal boundaries, then you can start building boundaries with other people. A lot of times when people talk about boundaries, they talk about it from an external perspective. They talk about it from an external perspective. Oh, I'm going to set a boundary with this person or that person or whatever. But what makes those boundaries easier to set externally is when you have your own internal boundaries in place. An internal boundary is how you treat yourself. Okay, it's how you treat yourself. It's not abusing yourself. But in order to stop abusing yourself, you've got to recognize where you're abusing yourself and where it came from. Because we don't abuse ourselves intentionally. We don't abuse ourselves intentionally. A lot of times there's stuff going on. It's patterns of behaviour that we've learned at some level, and it becomes compulsive because we don't know anything else. We don't know anything else. But when you're in a community of people that support you, that understand, and also sometimes they behave the same way, you can talk about it. We can understand. We can share tools and say, this is what I did. This is one of the reasons why I share so openly about my own personal process, why I talk about my recovery, why I talk about what it means to be a black woman and racial sobriety, and talking about my own issues with attachment and family abandonment. And all. I talk about that stuff really openly because it's important. I want people to understand that they're not alone, and that the people that I work with, the reason why they wanted to start working with me in the first place is because they understood what was going on for me. They identified, that's the word I'm looking for. They identified with the stuff that I talked about, and they was like, wow, this woman, she's been through this, and this is what she's doing now. I want some of that. You know, that's why I share so openly, because that identification and that connection is very healing. Just being in a space with other women and other people doing the same thing is so freaking healing. And I know it's difficult for us to talk about it, and that's why I talk about not just sharing my story, but I talk about the topics that people don't want to talk about, because it's those topics that we don't want to talk about that need to be exposed so that we can heal as a community, so that we can heal the sisterhood, so that we can really, really understand why certain behaviours within the community are continuing to keep us isolated and keep us, to keep us in the shame or whatever it is, whatever in the anger or whatever emotions that we find difficult to manage, that we find difficult to deal with. So having stronger boundaries and will increase your confidence, but the boundaries have to begin from within. Okay, so that's number 11 and 12. Number 13. Having more love, manifesting more love, and being in this Living in Love program is going to help you to reduce anxiety. It's a bit more about what I was saying earlier about being in a community of people and having that identification, and understanding that, being isolated and not being able to talk about stuff, and also just being a black person can create anxiety. Just being a black person living under the system of racism creates anxiety. One of the things that came up in when I went to Ghana actually was the whole concept around racial anxiety. Okay, and what it is kind of like this the unconscious thinking about living in Britain, which is predominantly white, and kind of always being around white people all the time, and that kind of anxiety around it's hard to articulate. But I had a breakthrough when I went to Ghana. We went to Cape Castle, which is one of the massive areas where our ancestors were held before they got put on the ships to go into the slave trade. And I remember going into one of the rooms, and I had such a visceral response to it. And what I kind of make up from that is that at some level, being around white people today, my body, my ancestral DNA kind of remembers the fear and the trauma from that. I don't know if that makes sense. I know it sounds a bit way out there, but I was talking to my therapist about this last week, and she was like, well, no, there was a lot more studies coming out talking about a lot of the trauma and stuff that happens. It can get passed down. It can get passed down into the tissues. And if we think about it, our ancestors were in slavery for 200 odd years, 204 years or whatever, however long it was. That's a lot of trauma. That's a lot of trauma. That's a lot of pain. And as I said before, none of our ancestors went to therapy. And all of that pain and trauma and separation and beating and raping and all that stuff that happened to our ancestors, without going to therapy when they left the plantations, that stuff is gonna have an impact. That stuff is gonna have an impact. So I believe that the anxiety that I feel when I'm in white dominated spaces is kind of like a low level anxiety, is a result of that stuff in my DNA is being triggered. That stuff in my DNA is being triggered. Apart from the fact that you don't know if white people are going to switch. There's that whole. I've heard people saying that they feel anxious because they don't know, especially like in the workplace and stuff. They're black women that I've worked with that have talked about feeling really anxious in the workplace because they don't know how white people are going to react. And also, if you go on social media and you see all these ridiculous stories about white women calling the police on black people for stupid reasons, that's all going to become part of it. That's all going to become part of it. It's like, how safe am I? Your body is telling us, my body is telling me that at some level it feels unsafe. Okay, it feels unsafe. This is one of the reasons why I am so adamant that black spaces are a absolute must when it comes to the healing process. It's not that we sit in the spaces and talk about white people. We don't talk about white people. If you notice, really, when I talk about this stuff on my live streams, I don't really talk about white people as such, what white people do. I don't talk about that. I talk about the impact of it. I talk about the impact of it because the power is in how it's impacted you, how it's affected you, and what you're going to do about it. How you're going to respond to it. How you're going to take care of yourself around it. How you're going to deal with the rage. How you're going to deal with the shame. That's my focus. At the end of the day, what white people do ain't nothing to do with me. If somebody wants to act out their white supremacist nonsense, that's on them. My responsibility to myself and to the people that I serve is to teach them how to deal with the impact of racism, the emotional response around racism. That's what's important. That is what is important. And there is a low-level anxiety that happens living under the system of racism, because at the end of the day we are targeted so much, and the oppression happens in 9 areas of people activity. Anybody that's read Dr. Wilson's work, that all knows Neely Fuller's work, they talk about racism as a system in 9 areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labour, law, politics, religion, sex and war. That's a lot. So it makes sense that black people in particular are going to feel anxious around white people, because that system is very powerful. And it doesn't matter if you're living in the States or wherever you're living. If you're living in under Western, in a Western society, there is going to be a low level something going on there. There's going to be a low, and I didn't experience that in Ghana. I didn't experience it when it was over there, because it's just all black people. I probably saw maybe 4 or 5 white people the whole time I was there, and they were tourists. And it was weird, actually. It was really weird when I did see them. But even then, I could feel the low level, I could feel the body was triggered by it. And then when I got on the plane to go back to the UK, and obviously got off at Heathrow and all the rest of it and saw the white people, I could see my body just sort of, but then I was able to observe it as opposed to respond to it, because it had come out of my unconscious. I didn't realise it was as it was until I'd gone to Cape Castle and done all of that stuff and realised that was what was going on. That's the power of self-awareness, of self-knowledge. That's the power of black mindfulness, being aware of what's going on in my body without actually reacting to it. I could go home and take care of myself. I can go home and self-soothe. I can talk to somebody on the phone. I can journal about it. I can speak about it, so that I can feel empowered not to act out in it, or to hurt myself, or to take it out on somebody else. I don't have to do any of that. I can observe it for what it is and take care of myself. I can observe it for what it is and take care of myself. Instagram is going to go off in a minute. I've been rabbiting on for over an hour, and it's telling me I've only got 14 seconds left. So if you are interested in watching, getting the rest of the things for this, which is, I've got another 7 to do, then nip over to my page at Yard of Greatness on Facebook to watch the rest. Or actually, what I might do is just do another one. Actually, I'll just share to story. What I'll do is I'll just go live again. I'm just going to go live again on Instagram. Just bear with me, Facebook. Greetings, Instagram. June Allen here, your racial sobriety mentor. Okay, so this is round 2. This is round 2 of so anybody that's watching the previous one can just log on and just see the other one again. Okay, so let's carry on. So that's reducing anxiety and overwhelm. So in order to experience more love, we have to be willing to be honest about the anxiety, because that all of that stuff that we feel, if it's unconscious, then that is going to come out in our relationships as well. That can come out in our relationships if we don't feel safe. Okay, so again, it's about just being honest and being able to observe that stuff. Okay, number 14 is increased self-acceptance. It's what I was saying earlier. You know, the more work we do on ourselves, the more we are in black spaces to have these honest conversations, the more self-acceptance we had. I noticed that when I came back from Ghana, there was kind of like a renewed power that I felt about being a black woman. You know, I felt an anchored sense of self. When you're in black spaces that talk about this stuff, there's an anchored sense of self that is just so freaking awesome. And you need that. It's almost like you need to be nourished in black spaces so that you can go out into the world and be who you are. You know, my therapist said to me, before I went to Ghana, she said, what you need to be doing is you need to go to Ghana and kind of drink from the bosom of the motherland so it can really anchor you in who you are as a black woman. And she was right. She was so right. I just came back feeling so much more anchored. I mean, I was quite anchored before I went, but there was something about being in a black country that was just so freaking powerful. If anybody is interested in coming on the Ghana trip next time, actually, we've got another, we're going to be taking another group of ladies out to Ghana in October 2020. So if you click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. And you can register your interest for the Ghana 2020 trip. So that, and also the website, the link that will take you to the Ghana page has got all of the details and information, the workshops and all the rest of it that we did this year, so you can get an idea of what we'll be doing next year. Hi, for those of you that have just joined on Instagram, because I've just started it again, my name is June Allen from juneallen.net, and I teach black women how to heal from the impact of racism with racial sobriety and personal empowerment. So you'll have to watch my stories, those of you that are on Instagram, to watch the other 14 tools for manifesting more love, because it cut out after an hour because I was rabbiting on, and you can watch this story to get the rest of them, if that makes sense. But so today's topic is all about 20 ways to manifest more love, and it's all inspired by my new program, Living in Love, a monthly subscription circle for black women to explore all aspects of love: cultural love, self-love, parenting love, love for creativity, love for beauty, love for self, loving your inner child. All of these things are all going to be part of the program. So if you're interested in joining you want to find out more about the Living in Love program, you can go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net, and the link is actually in the bio on my Instagram page. Okay, so let's keep going. So we've got 5 more to do. So next one is 15, okay, which is deeper connections to others. Okay, when you start to have more connection with yourself, you'll be able to have deeper connections to others. And this was one of the beautiful things that came out of that I realized when I started doing this work, and actually one of the reasons why I'm able to just feel more compassion for others, because I have more compassion for myself. And in staying committed to doing this work, I was able to show up more for other people, so the more work that you do on yourself, the deeper relationships, the more depth that you'll have in the relationships that you have with others, because you're more connected to yourself, you're more connected to your emotion, you're more connected to your needs, the more connected to your own beauty, you're connected to your own humanity, and that is going to have an impact on how you're in relationship with other people, even if and also if you're a parent as well, which is number 16. This is one of the core things that happened to me as well, and one of the reasons why I started doing this work, actually, because I wanted to be a parent that was a lot more compassionate. I wanted to feel more connected to my daughter, I really wanted to feel more connected to her. So I was really, really committed to being a more compassionate parent. But in order to do that, I had to first learn how to be really compassionate to myself. You know, so the Living in Love program, again, is a non-judgmental space. You know, it's a safe space because I have boundaries in place. When we do the check-ins and all of that kind of stuff, it's a boundaried space. So it's important that the women, there was very set guidelines around how the women speak during their sharing time, and how they're not, they're not allowed to comment on other people's shares and stuff like that. Because for a lot of us, in order for us to be vulnerable, we have to feel that we're not going to be judged and that we're not going to be shamed for saying the things that we say. So that is a really, really important part of the check-in process, is the sister circle process. And then that just creates more compassion. That creates a lot more compassion. The space becomes compassionate, and so people feel safe to be more vulnerable and to be more honest. And it just creates a more intimate space. It creates a much more emotionally intimate space. And again, that in of itself is another form of love. It's a form of love for humanity, love for your fellows, love for your fellow sisters. You know, building sisterhood. These are all different aspects of love, being able to experience and give and nurture the space for more love. Okay, so that's number 15 and 16 about deeper connections and being a compassionate parent. Number 17 is the cultural context. The cultural context around love. Now, I did speak about this a little bit briefly earlier, but in order to manifest more love, you got to know who you are as a black person. There has to be a cultural context to love. There has to be. You know, because at the end of the day, it's all about your identity. It's all about nurturing who you are. It's not just about understanding the impact of racism, but reclaiming the parts of yourselves that were taken. Reclaiming the parts of yourselves that were taken and eroded and continue to be oppressed by white supremacy. So reclaiming your natural hair, reclaiming your adornment. You know, one of the reasons why I bought so many new clothes and stuff when I was in Ghana, because I wanted this to be an important part of my identity. And when I put these clothes on, I feel connected to my ancestors. I feel connected to myself. I feel connected to my blackness. I feel connected to my beauty. I feel connected to my melanin. I feel connected to spirit, because it's an external expression of who I am. It's an external expression of who I am, which cultural love is an important aspect of love. And it's also resisting white supremacy. It's an important part of resisting white supremacy. And obviously people don't always think about that when they do whatever. But it is part of it. But I just want to enjoy. I want to enjoy and I want to immerse myself in love of culture. You know, so to experience more love involves embracing your identity, embracing who you are, and not trying to assimilate into something that wants you to deny who you are. You know, that creates depression. Choosing to be part of all of that stuff, but you're constantly dumbing yourself down, it creates depression. I believe that depression is anger without the fire. And if you're constantly being oppressed by a system that's telling you that you're not good enough, that you're ugly, that you're black, you're too dark, you're this, you're that, of course you're going to feel depressed. Of course you're going to feel upset. Of course you're going to feel sad. Of course you're going to feel ugly. You're going to feel all of those things. Because consciously and unconsciously we're being told that we're crap. So being in a space or being part of a program, being part of a community which celebrates who you are, that honours who you are, that is encouraging you to go out and be yourself, is an important part of experiencing more love, of nurturing more love, and of generating and manifesting more love from others. Because there is nothing more amazing, more wonderful, more beautiful than somebody who is confident, than somebody who knows who they are, than somebody who isn't going to take any crap from anybody. People don't come on and tell me nothing about who I am, because I know who I am. When I first started doing this work, I was really frightened to do a lot of live stream, because I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get trolled. I'm always talking about white supremacy and I'm talking about racism. I was thinking I'm going to get trolled to death. And do you know what? I don't really get trolls. I don't get them. And to this day, I don't really know why. Maybe it's because I don't really talk about white people as such. I just talk about the impact. Maybe that's why I don't get trolled. But I don't get trolled. But I also know who I am. I also know who I am. So I don't have to justify myself to anybody. If anybody does come on and say anything, and the rare occasion when they have, I'll just block them because I'm not interested in what they've got to say. My commitment is to my people. My commitment is to my sisters. My commitment is to myself to make sure that I can show up and serve when I do these live streams, or when I do my programs, or when I do my workshops, or whatever it is. My commitment is to you all, to make sure that you're getting the information that you need. So there can't be any excuses. You don't have to make excuses because there's stuff out there. There's tools. There's tools, and there's environments, and there's safe spaces for you to be able to do this work without fear. You know, it's so important. So the cultural context is an important part. It's an important part of this process. One of the things that the ladies love in my circle as well is that I do meditations and I do affirmations and all of that kind of stuff. But they're all with a cultural context. I will talk about being blackalicious, and I will talk about black skin, and I will talk about hair, and I will talk about all these different things. But in the I use words and phrases and empowering things that relate to culture. That's an important part. We need to hear it spoken about in a positive context. We need to hear it spoken in a positive context so that we can begin to stand in our identity and own it from a place of being unapologetic, and not from a position of shame or thinking that we have to hide who we are. No, we don't have to hide who we are. We have the right to be who we are. We have the right to stand in our greatness, just like everybody else. But we have to do it first for ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission to do it for ourselves. And sometimes that requires us to do it in a group so that we can be supported. Because when we make that transition from doing it ourselves, from trying to empower ourselves to doing it with others, then that's when a lot of our shame and a lot of our codependency and whatever can get triggered, even when we're around other people that look like us, especially if there's family stuff there that's unresolved. Being around other black people can trigger us, you know, and that is something else that I talk about as well in great detail around this healing process. The fact that it's not just white supremacy, it's the way that it's been internalized within our families, and so we can shame each other, and we get triggered within our families. A lot of the stuff that, you know, that I talk about and that I deal with when working with people is not what the white man's done to them, but actually what their family members have done to them. That is real talk. And black people don't always like to have that conversation because they think, oh, we've got enough to deal with dealing with the white man. But actually, we can deal with the white man if our families are strong. The reason why our families are not strong is because we're not dealing with what we're doing to each other. We're not talking about the internalized stuff. Okay? We can deal with the white man if we've got strong internal families. But when our families are not strong, we have to build a family of choice. We have to find a community of choice that is strong. Okay, and that is what this Living in Love program is about. I want to build a sisterhood. I want to build an army of sisters that are not only strong in their identity and their sense of self, but can also be vulnerable and loving and tender and generous and compassionate with each other, because that's also lacking. We don't want all that tough, strong yang energy. We want that soft yin, compassionate energy as well, because that's not what we're used to, but that's what a lot of us want. That's what a lot of us want. Okay, so that's number 17. The cultural context is important. Number 18, the social context, the sense of belonging, the sisterhood. It's just like what I was saying before. That sisterhood, that community is such a powerful thing and such a beautiful thing, and not to be underestimated. It's so important. Okay, the identification, the not feeling alone, the shame reduction, and just kind of just staying on shame for a minute. One of the fastest ways to reduce shame is to be in groups. Is to be vulnerable in groups that are boundaried and that feel safe. Healing spaces that are boundaried and feel safe are the fastest way to reduce shame. That's why the recovery process works. That's why 12-step recovery groups work, because you go into those spaces and there are boundaries around how to share and all of that kind of stuff, and people are allowed to kind of process all of their stuff, and they become healthier because they've got a safe space to be able to release a lot of it. And this was kind of one of the models that I've kind of adapted for us, to be able to do the same thing, to be able to release our shame, to be able to feel like we belong and not feel isolated in what we're trying to do, and be around other women that are doing the same thing so it feels safe. Yeah, that's so important. So that's number 18, increased sense of belonging. Number 19 is breaking generational patterns. Yeah, I love this one, because as a parent, it was massive for me to be able to really stay committed to breaking the generational patterns. And that is, you know, specifically around my parenting, and also the way that I've had relationships, you know, the way that I'm in relationship with people, be it romantic or otherwise, has changed so much because I've done so much work on myself, you know. And that is breaking generational patterns of codependency, breaking generational patterns of being in relationships with people that are emotionally unavailable. That's another good one, you know, a good one that I would repeat. Being in relationships with people that were just unavailable. You know, I'm not doing that no more. I can smell them a mile off now, and I won't engage. I just won't engage. You know, I'll be polite, but it's not going any further. Breaking the generational patterns is how we begin to really start to have more love in our lives, and to begin to experience more love with ourselves. We have better relationships with ourselves because we feel more confident when we're not doing the things that have been, you know, in our families, that have created the toxicity in our families, the internalized racism that was never healed. We have a responsibility to do that work. We have a responsibility to do the work that our mums couldn't do. We have a responsibility to do the work that our dads couldn't do. Okay, we're the first generation of children that have access to therapists, more black therapists, more support groups, all that kind of stuff. And I know that, you know, there's still a bit of a stigma around doing it, but at the end of the day, you have to leave that stigma behind and crack on. You have to leave that stigma behind and crack on with what needs to be done. And we need to be doing this work. If you're serious about breaking generational things and being a better parent and really showing up in your relationships, then you need to do the internal work. You need to, as black people, we need to stop looking at the white man and focus on what you're doing. Because unity in the community is not going to, I will say this, unity in the community is not going to happen without personal responsibility. Unity in the community, whether we're talking about relationships, whether we're talking about family, it's not going to happen unless you're doing the internal personal work. That's where you have to start. If you're not willing to do the personal work, then you can forget about all the other stuff, doing stuff in the community. Because at the end of the day, you have to start from within. One of the sayings that they say in recovery is, let it begin with me. Let it begin with me. And I'm so committed to my own process, my own therapy, my own recovery process, because I can't be sharing this stuff with you if I'm not doing it. The reason why I'm so passionate about it on here is because I'm doing the work. I'm going to therapy. I do my recovery meetings. I do my journaling. I do what I need to do. And I know this stuff works, which is why I'm able to share it with you with the passion that I do. This stuff works. But you have to make the commitment. You have to make the commitment. You have to give yourself time to do it. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to be gentle. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to do shit that you don't want to do. You got to do stuff that's painful. You got to do all of this stuff, but it works. I promise you, it works. This stuff works. If you go to if you click the link in the bio and go to the page that will take you to the Living in Love page, there's some testimonials down there from that some of the women have written around how how they've experienced, the previous program that I've done. They'll tell you themselves. You don't have to hear it from me. You can hear it from them. So the sense of sisterhood is really powerful, really, really powerful. And then obviously breaking the generational patterns and stuff like that is really, really important. But we have to start doing those things now by doing it, taking personal responsibility. And the last one, number 20, you can manifest more love by doing this program, because as you work personally, okay, like I was saying before, you can annihilate the system of racism from the inside out. It's like I was just saying, stop looking at what the white man's doing and focus on what you're doing from the inside out. But every single decision that you make around your personal growth is an act towards annihilating white supremacy. Because self-love and white supremacy can't coexist. Self-love as a black person, as a black woman, and white supremacy cannot coexist. Because one cancels out the other. One erodes the other. You can't love yourself and enable white supremacy. You can't do both. So the work that you're doing personally has a massive social impact. Whether you believe that or not. And it might not seem like that in the beginning, because obviously you're doing your own personal work. But when you're doing your own personal work, it has a massive social impact. It has a massive social impact because you're going to show up in the community different. You're going to show up in your family different. You're going to show up with your friends different. You're going to show up when your lover, your partner, your husband. You're going to show up different because you're more accepting of yourself as a black woman. And you ain't going to tolerate no racist nonsense from nobody. You're not going to tolerate it. Because you have a deeper sense of self and understanding of your identity and who you are. And once you're anchored in that, no one can take it. They can't take it from you. They can try, but you got your boundaries in place. You got your community in place. You got your family of choice. You got your tools. You don't need none of that rubbish. You don't need to absorb. You don't need to obsess yourself with none of that nonsense about what they're doing, because you can focus on what you need to be doing to take care of yourself, to nourish your relationships, to nourish your relationship with your children, to nourish your gifts so that you can show up in the world, not just as an entrepreneur or an artist or a therapist or whatever you do, but you can show up as a black artist, therapist. You can do all of that. You can do all of that without apology, because you're grounded in your sense of identity. You don't feel like you have to assimilate with anybody because you're grounded. And you deserve to show up in the world exactly as you are, as a beautiful black woman that you are, in your power, in your greatness. You deserve to do that. If you're interested in joining the Living in Love program, you can click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. So that was 20 reasons, 20 ways that you can manifest more love, and the benefits also of joining the Living in Love program. If you've got any questions at all, or if you have any comments or anything that you didn't understand, then you can drop a message in the comments below if you're watching on the replay. Or you can direct message me, or you can email me at info@yardofgreatness.com. If you know somebody who you think would be inspired by the program or anything that I've said in this broadcast, then please share it with them. Thank you so much for joining me for today's broadcast. I don't take for granted that you'd spend time with me today. Whatever you choose to spend, however you choose to spend the rest of your day, enjoy that. And I am signing off. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.